Hey guys, welcome to section 4, chapter 1 of the Algebra program. And today we're going to be adding with real numbers. So, sounds pretty easy, but remember that real numbers include all sorts of numbers, not just whole numbers and integers, which would include negative numbers, but also like fractions and decimals. And so today we need to be really careful with our signs, and we're just going to review all sorts of ways that we can add all sorts of numbers. So hopefully it won't be too challenging. I'm going to start off super easy. Hopefully, when you were learning this, either in pre-algebra or before, whenever were first learning the number line, you could easily just find like 3, and then we would say, okay, add 5, 6, 7, 8, and you would go up to 8, and you would know that 3 plus 5 is 8, right? And then we used the number line a lot when we introduced integers to you last year. So what if I had like 3 plus a negative 5, right? Well, if you took my class, and hopefully any class, you used a number line, and we told you, okay, start at 3, and then when you add a negative, you're going to go left, right? So we would go left 5 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we would arrive at negative 2. So 3 plus negative 5 is negative 2. And we strongly encouraged you to use the number line when we were adding 2 sets of negatives. And we would tell you, make sure you start 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Make sure you start over here at negative 7. And then when you add a negative 2, you're going to be down here at negative 9. And hopefully you did that enough last year that it's ringing a bell. It's coming back. And you're not like, what? I've never seen that before. If you have not dealt with this before, this would be a time that you need to pause this video and you need to text me, and I can send you a video from the pre-algebra where we introduce this concept and give you a chance to work with it just with whole numbers and integers before we add things in here like decimals and fractions and mixed numbers. So feel free to do that if you're not comfortable. If you feel like you're like, yeah, I saw that before. I think I can do this. Awesome. Then we're going to keep moving on. All right, so things are going to get complicated with decimals and fractions, and the number line is going to become less helpful to us. It's helpful in the sense that we would know which direction we should be moving, but it's going to be difficult. We're not just going to be able to add and get to the number that we need. So I'm going to give you a little rule to follow. So the first is, here's our rule. If you have a negative plus a negative, I want you to add and keep the sign. All right, I'm going to explain that here in just a minute. And then there's one other example type that we need to work through. If we have a positive plus a negative, or a negative plus a positive, then what you're going to do is actually subtract and keep the sign of the larger. Okay, I'll give you just a second there. All right, so you're going to see 2 instances here, and so our rule is going to apply to either. I did not include if you just have a positive plus a positive, of course that's going to be a positive. And I do think that there's a few of those in there. I wanted to give you a generic rule. All right, so let's go ahead, let's dive in. What if we have something like negative 7 plus 1.5? All right, this one's not so bad. You could probably figure it out with the number line, but I want to practice our rule. So we're going to look at this second rule here. Maybe I'll even number them. Like this is rule number 1, and this is rule number 2. So this is a case of rule number 2. And rule number 2 says subtract and then keep the sign of the larger number. Okay, so over here, I'm going to take 7 and I'm going to subtract 1.5. Well, I'm going to painfully work through these examples at the beginning just to give you a refresher of how to deal with decimals and fractions, but perhaps as we go on and time doesn't permit, I'll skip a few steps. But early on, I'm going to try to work these all out for you just to review how we would subtract decimals or fractions or whatever. Okay, so I can't take 5 away from 0. Of course, I have to go over here and borrow. And then I could subtract, bring down that decimal place, and then subtract 6 minus 1. So the rule says subtract and then keep the sign of the larger. So of these two numbers, the 7, of course, is the larger. And so my answer is going to be negative 5.5. So I subtracted, and I kept the sign of the larger. Okay. What if I had something, I should have done this one first. All right, this is a case of rule number 1. Rule number 1 says add and keep the sign. So we could have done this on the number line, right? We could have been at -4 and we take away 3 and we would have been at 7. Or using our rule, we would add them, 4 plus 3, and keep the sign, which is -7. Okay. All right, what if we have something like -1/2 plus -3/5? Okay, so this is going to be rule number 1, right? So we are going to add and keep the sign. So first I'm going to add. So I'm just going to pull out, I'm going to ignore the negatives for a minute, and I'm just going to pull out that 1/2 and the 3/5, because remember, I have different denominators. So now I have to give them the same denominator before I can add them. And of course, the first thing that 2 and 5 go into is 10. And so I'm going to have to multiply top and bottom over here by 5 in order to get 10 in my denominator. And top and bottom by 2 over here to get 10 in my denominator. And then that is going to yield, you multiply straight across here. Remember this? Hopefully you'll be like, oh yeah, Michelle, yeah, this is a breeze, no problem. All right, 6 over 10. So I multiplied straight across. Now once we have the same denominator, I can add the top and keep the bottom. Okay, so my rule said add and keep the sign. So our sign was negative, which means I need to add a negative there. And our answer is going to be -11/10. All right, the other thing that's going to change in this course for me personally is your use of mixed numbers. So we used a lot of mixed numbers while we were in, middle school and late elementary school. But moving forward, we don't really use mixed numbers and they complicate things. So I am perfectly content, this should probably relieve you, to leave your answers in what we called an improper fraction. Okay, at the beginning, if it makes you like super uncomfortable, and on the side you want to think, okay, 10 goes into 11 once, you have 1 left over, like you can still kind of make that in your head, but feel free at this point to completely leave things in improper form. That's actually the way we roll moving forward. Okay, let's crank out another example here. All right, what if we had -4 3/8 plus 1 15/16? Okay, so this is rule number 2, right? Because I have a negative and then I have a positive. And I have a lot going on. I got mixed numbers, so I got to change those into improper. Then I have to get a common denominator. And then my rule tells me I have to subtract them. So several things going on here. First off, I'm going to change it into improper fraction. From here on out, I change everything to improper. They're just going to be easier to work with. Okay, so remember it's 8 times 4, which is 32, plus 3 gives me 35/8. And then over here, 16 times 1 is 16, plus 15 is 31 over 16. Now I need a common denominator. So of course that's going to be 16, and all I have to do is multiply top and bottom by 2. And then multiply across. If you're struggling with the changing of the fractions to same denominators, I would encourage you to kind of stop this video too and add in a little lesson. I can send you a video or jump online and just review that. The more proficient you are, the easier life is going to be. Okay. So now we have improper with the same denominator. And now my rule says subtract them and keep the sign of the larger. So the larger number is this guy, 4 3/8. So over here, I'm going to subtract, actually. So 70 minus 31 is 39/16, and we keep the sign of the larger, which is negative. And again, don't feel like you have to convert that into improper. All right, let us do one more example here. Let's use a decimal example. What if I had 5.04 plus a negative 7.01? Okay, this is rule number 2 again, which says we're going to subtract and keep the sign of the larger. So over here, I'm going to set this up minus 5.04. And I'm going to go ahead and borrow over here. And I'm going to get 9 and then 11. And then I'm going to subtract. I'm going to bring this down. And then I'm going to keep the sign of the larger. Okay, I feel like I moved through that kind of quickly. If that was too fast, I encourage you to go back, slow down, make sure that you understand the difference between the rules. If you feel like the number line is helpful enough, do that. I'm just giving you another option that's a little bit quicker sometimes when you don't have a number line. But I want you to finish up your notes. I want you to read through the examples in the text and then begin your assignment.